first round, it makes sense that it would not require competitive bidding because under the first lease, that's where the contractor is paying the school district. So why would you ever have to have competitive bidding if someone's giving you money? Secondly, now, however, I will acknowledge that if you're just doing a typical lease, say you've got some excess property and you want to lease that property out to some private entity, say it's a daycare center, and they want to lease one of your empty school buildings, then yes, you do have to enter into a competitive process, and you would only lease it to the person who promises to pay you the most lease payments. But remember, this lease-leaseback transaction is not for the purpose of utilizing excess property, which is covered in different education code sections. This one is for the purpose of financing construction. And so, in this instance, your site lease, I contend, does not require competitive bidding because it's just simply the necessary first transaction in order to convey your property to the contractor. And the contractor pays you some nominal amount. It's only under the second transaction, and that's what I contend is subject to the 17417, where you're paying, where the school district is paying the contractor. That's the one that should be subject to competitive bidding. So let's look at what are the requirements of 17417. Yeah.
If you could go back to that slide for
Sure.
just a second. If you were non-competitive in step one and you leased it to company A, how could you have something competitive in the sublease when they're the only ones who control that land? It can't be competitive to put the school there and lease it back. So it doesn't, how does that work?
Once again, you have crystallized my thoughts eloquently. And that's actually the second point I meant to make before I left this, which is exactly that. The other reason, the second reason you don't have competitive bidding on the site lease is exactly what you were getting at. If you did, there's a chance, see, under my interpretation, the sublease must be competitively bid, i.e. it must be awarded to the person who offers to build your school for the lowest amount possible. If you applied competitive bidding to the site lease as well, since you're receiving bids from multiple parties, if you require competitive bidding on the site lease, there's a chance that someone would offer to pay you more on the site lease, and they would get the site lease even though they're high on the sublease. And so the transaction would diverge. You have two different parties. So you can't require competitive bidding under both transactions because there's a risk that one transaction would go to one bidder and the other transaction would go to the other bidder. Go ahead.
Well, isn't this, in fact, you've got it backwards, that you would ordinarily do competitive building to build a project, and whoever gets it, you then lease him the site for $1?
Yes, but the legislature, in their, quote, infinite wisdom, put the competitive one at 417 and the non-competitive one at 406. And so the whole lease-leaseback process is defined in 17400 through 17409. So if you just start from the top and start reading, the first one you come across is 406. And 406, according to my esteemed opponents, doesn't require competitive bidding, so we're done. We don't need to get to 417. So you are right. And in fact, that's really how the process goes, is, you know, I'll get into the 417 requirements, which... Yeah.
If you lease the land and I build it, do I still have to use prevailing wages and non-stick architecture and all that?
Yes, and that's what's in the other sections between 400 and 429. Somewhere in there it does say you must pay prevailing wages, and up in 402 it says must be pursuant to plans and specs approved by DSA. And so this whole package, 400 through 429, I'm abbreviating, 17400 through 17429, has all the other looks and feels and requirements of traditional construction in schools. What I'm focusing on with regard to litigation efforts, though, focuses right in on just the bidding side of it. And so the next slide in your guys' package is, oops, one more slide. The elements of 17417. did a little paraphrasing, because 17417 is two long paragraphs, very densely tied together, because again, the legislature in their infinite wisdom don't always write in the clearest of prose. But it distills down into the following requirements: that if you're going to do lease-leaseback, with regard to the sublease, whereby you're going to pay the contractor the cost of construction, you have to, number one, adopt a resolution declaring your intent to do a lease-leaseback. Number two, you have to adopt a resolution saying what is the minimum rental you're going to pay. That sets the floor as far as, it would actually induce contractors, if you say, hey, I'm only going to pay the minimum rental I'm going to pay is $500,000, and this contractor says the rental is really going to have to be $1 million over 20 years, then they're going to know, okay, I'm not going to bother. So you got to adopt a resolution stating the minimum rental. In your resolution, you also state the maximum number of years. Again, you're just creating an algebraic equation. Then you adopt a resolution that says when the proposals are going to be received, and when the proposals are received, how the rental is going to be expressed. Is this annual rental? Is this monthly rental? How is it going to be expressed so that all the proposals you're getting are in the same terms, so you can get apples-to-apples evaluation. Moving on to the remaining elements of 17417. So it says when and where the sealed proposals are going to be received at. You've got to give notice of the meeting, and then at that time you receive the proposals, you open them, you read them aloud in public, so it's all be open. You don't have to decide exactly at that point whether or not you're going to go forward with the transaction. You just have to memorialize what are the bids that you've received. Because remember, in all of these methods, the ultimate discretion as to whether to go forward with the transaction always rests with the Board of Education. And so if at any time they feel that this doesn't meet their needs, this doesn't meet their price parameters, they can always reject all bids. You can use a different method, or they can use the same method to solicit new bids. So that's kind of the background on lease-leaseback. I'm going to talk a little bit about what I consider to be as the proliferation of lease-leaseback. And that is, I believe that as a result of the financial, marketing, and political efforts of a small group of consultants and general contractors who are profiting from this non-competitive bid lease-leaseback, that districts are being sold on this non-competitively bid lease-leaseback process. And so as a result of that, more and more districts are using this process. And so, as I said, where I'm from down in San Diego, 30 out of the 42 are doing it, and statewide the proportion is the same. I'm sorry, not the same, but increasing significantly. And so that leads us to the next issue is how are these lease-leasebacks being paid for? And they're being paid for with bond proceeds. And that's my attachment after the PowerPoint slides. There's a letter I wrote in January to the San Diego County Taxpayers Association, basically asserting that lease-leaseback is the other side of the capital appreciation bond coin. Basically that under capital appreciation bonds, as you all know and have heard, the taxpayers are paying too much